We are all just neon ghosts haunting the streets of our own memories and forgotten dreams. Join our exploration of the past and the lingering echoes of the choices we once made in the dark. Click subscribe now and face the ghosts of your own cinematic journey.
The night my brother handed me the keys to our grandmother's old flower shop, he was already laughing. Not the kind of laugh you share with someone, the kind that happens at someone. Try not to lose money on it, he said. He had his coat on, the expensive one, the charcoal wool one he bought the week after the reading of the will. He was already turning away before the sentence was finished. Like I wasn't worth the full rotation. My grandmother had two things worth leaving behind. The first was the condo on the 14th floor of the Harrington building downtown, 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the river that people in this city spent their whole careers trying to afford. My brother got that one. Of course he did. He was the firstborn. He had the name, the handshake, the ability to walk into a room and make people feel like they owed him something. His name was Elliot. It had always opened doors. The second was a flower shop in the Millhaven district, the kind of neighborhood that used to be something before the big box stores moved in and the foot traffic dried up. 62 years ago, my grandmother had opened that shop with $12 and a bicycle. She named it Rosewood and Rain. By the time she passed, the sign out front was faded, the awning had a hole in it from a storm 3 summers back, and the walk-in cooler had been broken for so long that she'd just stopped using it and worked around the absence of cold like it was a personality trait. I got that one. I was Serena, 29 years old, worked as an estate paralegal for 6 years, which mostly meant I spent my days reading documents that other people didn't bother to. I had a 1-bedroom apartment across town, a used Honda that needed new brake pads, and the particular kind of tiredness that comes not from overwork, but from being underestimated for so long that you start to believe it yourself. Elliot had always been my grandmother's golden boy. I had always been the one she actually talked to. There's a difference. I didn't understand it until she was gone. The shop had been closed for 8 months by the time I got the keys. 8 months of mail stacking up inside the door slot, of dust settling on the glass display cases, of whatever had been left in the back, slowly going still and dry. I drove there on a Tuesday morning in October, parked in front, and sat in the car for 10 minutes before I went inside. The smell hit me first. Dried flowers and old wood and something faintly sweet underneath, like the ghost of 100 arrangements. The floors were original tile, black and white hexagon, cracked in 2 places near the counter. The walls were lined with shelves that still held her ceramic pots and her wire ribbon spools and her little handwritten price tags and her looped, careful, cursive. I stood in the middle of that room and tried to see what Elliot saw when he looked at it. A liability, a burden, a punchline. Then I started going through the mail. Most of it was what you'd expect. Utility bills, a catalog from a floral supply company, a notice from the city about the business license renewal that had, apparently, been ignored. But near the bottom of the pile, under a coupon mailer and a property tax statement I almost set aside, there was an envelope from a company I didn't recognize. Halloran Property Group. The letter inside was dated 14 months ago. It was addressed to my grandmother. The language was careful and formal, the way corporate language always is when it's trying to sound routine while asking for something it very much wants. They were writing, they said, to express their continued interest in the Millhaven District property at 441 Crane Street. That was the shop's address, and to extend their previous offer, which had apparently been made verbally the prior spring. The number at the bottom of the page had 6 figures before the decimal point. I read it twice. Then I sat down on the floor between the counter and the display case, which was probably dusty, and I read it a 3rd time. My grandmother had never mentioned this. Not once. I didn't call Elliot. That was the first decision, and it was the right one. Instead, I went home and I did what I do. I'm a paralegal. I read documents. I find the thing inside the thing. I pulled up the county property records and I looked up 441 Crane Street and I looked at what the zoning maps showed for the Millhaven district. Then I looked at the development announcements from the city planning office for the last 3 years. Then I found the press release from 14 months ago, which was around the same time Halloran had sent their letter, about a mixed-use corridor project that the city had approved for the east side of the Millhaven district. 441 Crane Street sat at the corner of Crane and 8th. The corridor ran along 8th. I am not a real estate attorney. But I had spent 6 years reading contracts and property documents and estate filings, and I understood enough to understand this. The shop that my brother had laughed about, the shop he called a liability with his coat already on, sat directly on the edge of a city-approved development zone. Halloran hadn't written that letter out of sentimentality. I called a real estate attorney I knew from work. Her name was Judith, and she owed me a favor from a filing I'd untangled for her the previous spring. I told her what I had. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Send me everything." 3 days later, she called me back. "Serena," she said, "do you have any idea what you're sitting on? I should tell you about my brother, because you need to understand the specific texture of his contempt." Elliot was 41. He worked in finance, vaguely in the way that people in finance describe what they do in ways that are designed to make you feel you wouldn't understand the specifics. He had a wife named Adrian who hosted a lifestyle account on Instagram with 40,000 followers and who had, on the night of our grandmother's funeral reception, quietly suggested to me that the flower shop might make a cute little side project. She said, "Cute little," the way people say things they mean as insults but want to be able to deny. Elliot had always had the condo in his mind before the will was read. He'd mentioned it at Christmas 2 years ago, offhand, the way he did things. "Grandma keeps saying she wants me to have the Harrington place when she's gone. You know how she talks." And I had nodded and said nothing because there was nothing to say. He had already decided. He had already arranged it in his head like furniture. What he had not done in 8 months of owning his grandmother's estate as co-executor was set foot in the flower shop. Not once. He'd sent a property management company to assess it, and they'd sent back a report that said the HVAC was outdated and the walk-in cooler needed full replacement, and the building would require significant investment before it could be leased. He'd shown me that report at the estate meeting like it was evidence of something he'd always known. He had not asked me what I thought. He had not read the mail. He had not noticed the letter from Halloran Property Group. I thought about that a lot in the days after I talked to Judith. The thing about Elliot was not that he was stupid. He was not stupid. He was something more specific and more dangerous than stupid. He was incurious. He looked at things he'd already decided weren't worth his time, and he saw exactly what he'd decided to see. He'd looked at that shop and seen an old woman's clutter, and so that was all there was. He had never learned to read a room. Or a property record. Judith referred me to a commercial real estate broker named Owen, who specialized in exactly this kind of transaction. I drove to his office on a Thursday and sat across from him with the Halloran letter and the zoning documents and everything I'd pulled from the county records, and I watched his expression while he read. He looked up after a few minutes and said, "How long have you had this property?" 6 weeks, I said. He leaned back. "And you haven't talked to Halloran yet?" "Not yet." "Good," he said. "Don't. Not directly. Not yet." He looked at the zoning map again. "This corridor approval went through 14 months ago. They've been quiet because they're in acquisition mode. They're buying up everything adjacent before the anchor parcels come to market. When the anchor parcels move, the whole strip becomes leverage." "What does that mean in real numbers?" I said. He told me. I drove home and sat in my car in my apartment parking lot for a while after that. The hard part was what came before I knew any of this was going to work out. I want to be honest about that, because I think it matters. When I first got the keys and drove to Millhaven and stood in that dusty room, I was not secretly confident. I was not quietly plotting. I was tired in the way that people get tired when they have been told for long enough, by enough people, in enough different ways, that they are the lesser version of something. I had watched my brother get handed the shiny thing my whole life, and I had taught myself not to want it, which is not the same as not minding. The night before I found the Halloran letter, I sat in the flower shop for an hour and I almost called Elliot and told him he was right. It was too much work. I'd let the property management company handle the lease. I'd take whatever came from that. A small monthly check. Some distance from the whole thing? I didn't. Not because I was brave. Because I was too tired to make the call, and I went home and went to sleep instead. Sometimes the absence of action is the action that changes everything. I need to tell you about the storage room. After I found the letter and started working with Judith and Owen, I went back to the shop to go through the rest of the back areas carefully. I had only glanced at the storage room on my first visit. It was behind a door at the back of the workroom, and I'd opened it, seen shelves of old supplies and empty boxes, and moved on. This time I went through it properly. The storage room was deep, maybe 15 feet, with shelves on both sides. My grandmother had kept everything: ribbon spools from the 1980s, Old vases in styles that had gone out of fashion before I was born, a box of Christmas ornaments, and on the bottom shelf on the left side, pushed all the way to the back wall, a banker's box labeled in her handwriting, "Property. Do not discard." Inside the box were four things. The first was a folded survey map of the property dated 1987, with hand-drawn annotations in the margins in my grandmother's writing. The second was a copy of the original deed from 1962, with a rider attached that I had never seen in the estate documents. The third was a letter from 1989 from the city planning office addressed to my grandmother, acknowledging her formal objection to a proposed alley easement along the south side of the property and confirming that her objection had been sustained and the easement denied. The fourth was a handwritten note on her personal stationery. It was addressed to me. My name, just my name, at the top. No date, Serena. If you're reading this, you found the box, which means you're doing your job. Good. The south wall has no easement. Anyone who tells you different is wrong, and there are documents to prove it. Don't let Elliot rush you into anything. He doesn't like to read. You do. That's always been the difference between you two. Love, Gran. I sat on the floor of that storage room for a long time. She had known. She had known what she was doing when she left it to me. She hadn't given me the consolation prize. She had given me the thing she wanted me to have. The thing she knew I was the only one who would actually open. The south wall easement turned out to matter more than I could have guessed at the time. Owen explained it to me. The development corridor plan required a utilities access route along the south side of the Crane Street block. 3 of the 4 properties on that side had easements that the city had established years ago, which made utility routing simple. The fourth, the one where the easement had been denied in 1989 and never re-established, was 441 Crane Street. Without cooperation from the owner of 441 Crane Street, the utility routing for the entire corridor had to be redesigned. That was expensive. That was slow. That was, in Judith's language, leverage. Not the aggressive kind, the quiet kind. The kind where you simply know what you have and you wait for the other party to come to you. Halloran called in November. They asked to schedule a meeting. Owen went with me. We sat across a conference table from 2 men in expensive suits, and I listened while they made their initial offer, which was good, and then I watched Owen not react to it, which meant it was not good enough, and then I watched him explain, very calmly, about the survey from 1987 and the sustained objection from 1989, and the particular nature of the utility routing problem. The meeting lasted 2 hours. At the end of it, they asked for 10 days to consult with their development team. Owen and I walked to our cars. When we were outside, he said, "Your grandmother was a smart woman." "Yes," I said, "she was." I called Elliot the week before Thanksgiving, not because I owed it to him. I want to be clear about that. I called him because my grandmother's estate was still partially in both our names until the property formally transferred, which meant his signature was going to be required at some point, and I needed him to not be caught completely off guard when the number came up, because surprised people with legal standing are unpredictable, and I had worked too carefully for unpredictable. He answered on the 3rd ring. He was in the background of something, a restaurant maybe, or a party, voices and glass sounds. "Hey," he said. "What's going on with the shop? Did you finally find a tenant?" "Not exactly," I said. "I said you need to look at your email tonight. I'm sending you some documents." "Documents for what?" "The Millhaven property," I said. "There's been a development." He laughed a little. The same laugh as before, the one aimed at something. "Serena, I really don't have time to deal with Elliot," I said. "Look at the documents." Something in my voice made him stop. I had been working toward this without entirely knowing it, and something in me had settled into a place I didn't recognize. Not angry, not triumphant, not anything that needed his reaction to mean something. Just certain. Just clear. "Okay," he said. "I'll look tonight." He called me back at 11:14 p.m. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone when it lit up, and I sat with it for 2 rings before I answered. "What is this number?" he said. No greeting. His voice had a quality I had never heard in it before, a kind of tightness. "It's the offer from Halloran," I said. "That's the final number after negotiation. Owen thinks we can push another 5%, but that's the floor." Silence. "This can't be right," he said. "The zoning documents are in the 2nd attachment," I said. "The survey map and the letter from the city are in the 3rd. The rider on the original deed is in the 1st. It's all there." More silence. I heard him breathing. Why didn't Gran ever tell anyone about this? I thought about the note on her personal stationery. My name at the top. You do your job. You found the box. I think she told the right person, I said. The final sale figure, once Owen pushed the additional 5% and Halloran agreed rather than lose another 3 months on their timeline, was enough to change the shape of what my life looked like. I want to be exact, because I know from the story itself that vague numbers feel like a cheat. After taxes and legal fees and Owen's commission, my portion was enough to pay off my student loans and my car and have enough remaining that I could stop making decisions from fear for the first time since I graduated college. Elliot's portion, because it was a joint estate asset at time of sale, was equal. He took it without comment. He has not laughed at me since. I did not buy a company or a mansion. I'm still in my one bedroom. I did get the brakes fixed on the Honda. I took 2 weeks off work and drove up the coast and slept in hotels with good mattresses and ate at restaurants where I ordered whatever I actually wanted instead of the second cheapest thing. I called my grandmother's old friend, a woman named Bet, who had worked the shop with her in the 1970s, and told her what had happened. Bet cried. I almost did. The shop is gone now. Halloran broke ground in January. But before they did, I went back one last time and took the ceramic pots off the shelves. 6 of them, various sizes, in my grandmother's favorite pale green glaze. I have them on my windowsill. They catch the morning light in a way that makes the apartment feel different than it used to. My brother texted me in February. He'd seen something in the news about the Millhaven Corridor project, a rendering of what the block would look like, all glass and steel, Crane Street transformed into something unrecognizable. That could have been worth even more if we'd waited, he texted. You should have held out longer. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and went and made coffee. The pots on the windowsill were green against the morning light. I thought about my grandmother at 22, cycling to the city with $12 in a plan, choosing a corner on Crane Street that no one else thought was worth choosing. I thought about a box on a storage shelf that waited 40 years for the right person to open it. I thought about the particular kind of intelligence that looks at something and sees only what it's already decided is there. Then I thought about the kind that opens the box. I didn't text him back. I've thought a lot about why my grandmother didn't just tell me. She could have called me any afternoon and said, Serena, there's a box in the storage room and a letter from a developer and you need to know about this. She didn't. For a long time, I thought that was strange. Now I think I understand it. She wasn't withholding, she was testing. Not in the cruel way, not the way Elliot would have done it. Dangling something to watch you reach. She was testing in the way that people who have built something real understand you have to test. You don't hand someone a thing they haven't earned the capacity to hold. You create the conditions, and then you wait to see who opens the box. I opened the box. But I only got to the box because I didn't do what I almost did that first night. Call my brother, defer, make myself smaller to avoid conflict. The version of me that makes that call doesn't find the letter. Doesn't call Judith. Doesn't sit across from Owen and watch his face while he reads. The version of me that makes that call hands the whole thing away without ever knowing what it was. That's the part that stays with me, not the outcome. There's a version of the story where Elliot wins by default. Not because he's smarter or more deserving, or because the universe decided to reward him. He wins simply because I don't show up. Because I decide in advance that the thing I've been given isn't worth my full attention. That's how most losses happen, I think. Not through defeat. Through preemptive surrender dressed up as practicality. My grandmother understood something about the difference between the two of us that I hadn't fully understood about myself yet. Elliot looked at the shop and made a judgment and stopped looking. That's a kind of intelligence, efficient, decisive, useful in a lot of contexts. But it has a cost. The cost is everything you've already decided isn't there. He didn't read the mail, not because he was lazy, but because he had already concluded there was nothing in it worth reading. His mind was made up. Closed. Neat, I read the mail because that's what I do. Not because I'm special. Because I was trained, by years of paralegal work and honestly by years of being overlooked, to not trust the surface of things. To go one layer deeper. To ask what the document inside the document says. That's not a gift, it's a practice. It's something you build through the small daily choice to stay curious when incuriosity would be easier. And the ethics of it, the part about what kind of person I wanted to be through the whole thing, that mattered too. I could have made Elliot's life difficult when I found the leverage. I didn't. I called him before the final number came through. I made sure he understood what was happening. I gave him the information he needed even though he'd never once extended me the same courtesy, not because he deserved it. Because I didn't want to become someone who withholds information to watch people stumble. That's not a win I want. My grandmother raised me on the idea that how you do a thing is as important as whether you do it. She was right. The money changed the shape of my life, but the way I went about getting it, carefully, honestly, with my eyes open and my hands clean, that's the part I'll carry longest. Elliot got his half. I didn't fight that. What she left us was equal in number. What we did with what we found is the only part we actually owned.